Hello and welcome to the Gaggle, where we challenge and, if necessary, destroy media narratives. I'm George Szamuely. With me today, of course, is co-founder of the Gaggle, Peter Lavelle. So, Peter, um, among the stories that is getting very little coverage is the election in Belarus, where Alexander Lukashenko is likely very shortly to be announced that he has been re-elected for his seventh term as president. And the media, of course, done a little bit the usual thing. He's the last dictator in Europe, and so on. Um, but I notice, I don't know, maybe you notice something different, that there doesn't seem to be any of the usual energy of trying to, whip up some the fervor against Lukashenko, trying to get everyone foaming at the mouth about
It's a little over the years. It's been a little mini industry.
yeah,
Yes,
it's become a little. I mean, we've hardly heard about Tikhanovskaya. She was all over the
must
media
be.
just a few years ago.
She's in some Hilton somewhere around the world.
Exactly. We don't hear that, and so somehow the people have given up on Lukashenko. Now, one might think in terms of a conspiracy. Maybe there's still some vague attempt, as there was during the first Trump term, of trying to rope Lukashenko into the anti-Russian camp. And there was, remember, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. He went to Minsk. So that was what 2019, I think that was he went there, and suddenly they were making nice with Lukashenko, not because they suddenly changed their view that he's the last dictator in Europe, but they thought, hey, this would be quite neat. Let's split Russia and Belarus. But here's a story that it appears in France 24, which was, I thought, kind of an interesting view. First of all, here is
Which
the
is a rabidly anti-Russian outlet. Okay.
exactly. So now, first of all, this is the tweet or sent out by Kaja Kallas, the former prime minister of Estonia, the person who did extremely well in the Soviet Union and now pretends that somehow she lived under the Soviet jackboot during all those years. She says Lukashenko has clung to power for 30 years.
Well, no, he's been elected.
He's been elected. And then you kind of have to think about, well, why has he been re-elected? As we can see, if somebody's unpopular, people really hate you. They'll find ways to get rid of you. I mean, you can't just go on year in, year out ruling, for 30 years, if you're doing such a terrible job. Tomorrow he'll reappoint himself in yet another sham election. This is a blatant affront to democracy. Lukashenko doesn't have any legitimacy.
Yeah,
Now,
who elected her to her position?
that's right. But what was interesting, and I wasn't able to find it on YouTube, but there was earlier they asked Lukashenko about legitimacy, and he said, what difference would it make if I were to announce that Keir Starmer is not the legitimate prime minister of the UK, or if I were to announce that I don't recognize President Trump as the legitimate president of the United States? No one would care. No one would say, well, they would say, what does it matter what President Lukashenko says? And in the same way, what does it matter to us, Belarusians, what you say according to who's legitimate and who isn't? And that's it. So he doesn't have any legitimacy. Okay, you can go on repeating that, just as we can go on repeating and saying you have no legitimacy because you were never elected to this position.
Well,
Yeah,
George and I have a long-standing rule of thumb. If you win 50% plus one vote, then you won.
right.
Okay. Um, is American elections any cleaner than Belarusian elections?
Right.
Let's test that proposition.
That's right.
Let's
That's it.
test that. Let's test that.
Right.
Okay. And she's representing a bloc, the
Right.
EU, where there are forces within the EU trying to delegitimize the AfD in the upcoming election.
Right. Right.
Okay. So
Exactly.
should we talk about sham?
Right.
And then how about the EU aspirants?
Right.
Okay.
Right.
I mean, or even within the EU,
Right.
Romania, okay,
Right.
sham, okay,
Right.
Moldova, a sham.
That's right.
Georgia's at least hanging on.
Right.
I
But
mean,
that, yeah,
yeah, George just, I mean, this is almost kind of unfair because Burrell was an older guy,
right,
okay? He'd been to a few rodeos, okay? And he was fair. He was fair material.
right.
This is not fair material.
No, I quite agree. But this is the problem that the EU is just not in a very good position
Not in a good
to
place.
start talking about democracy. I mean, it's just, this is not a good time. You just cancelled an election in Romania because the wrong guy was about to win. I mean, the voting had already started and the wrong guy was about to win. So you canceled the election. You won an election in Moldova by disenfranchising hundreds of thousands of Moldovans living in Russia. You tried to cancel an election in Georgia. This time you weren't able to pull it off, but you tried. You went to a lot of trouble to overturn a Georgian election. So these EU elections are getting more and more ludicrous. Anyway, so this is Kaya Kallas, and then here's this France 24 says Belarus votes in election poised to extend decades-long rule of Alexander Lukashenko. And then he says, when Alexander Lukashenko emerged victorious from Belarus's presidential election in 2020, protesters came out on the streets to accuse him of election fraud and call for his resignation. But as Belarusians began voting Sunday, Lukashenko is all but certain to win a seventh term as the only leader most people in Belarus have ever known. And then it says, they talk about this Belarusian engineer, Vladimir Labanov, said he will cast his vote this weekend for the man that has led his Moscow-allied country since before he was born. Labanov, 24, credits the autocrat in power since 1994 for keeping order in the reclusive state,
Not
believe
reclusive. It's not reclusive.
it's not reclusive, believing that if 2020 mass protests had toppled Lukashenko, Belarus would have suffered the same fate as Ukraine.
Well, you didn't have to go to Vladimir Labanov to get that. You could have come to us.
You're going to
Okay.
come to us. Yeah. It's kind of the attitude that Georgians have as well. We kind of don't want to go down the Maidan path. That's not a good path. We already had a bad experience in 2008. Um, and then, so it says, there's still this Labanov says, in 2020, people did not understand so much. Our president showed which path we should take. And slowly people started to understand this. And now we have no war, like in Ukraine. I think we would have had the same as in Ukraine if the protests had been successful.
Yep.
It is a narrative that has been extensively used by Lukashenko, who in 2022 allowed his Russian ally, Vladimir Putin, to use Belarusian territory to invade.
Well, why do you have to call it a narrative?
That's right, exactly.
Okay.
Yes,
No, it's a review of the facts.
that's right.
Okay.
That's it. And then they say, on a gray winter day in Minsk, residents seemed mostly unbothered by the election, with many unable to imagine their country without Lukashenko. But why are they unbothered? I mean, why do they think, okay, this isn't bad? Well, maybe because they haven't had a bad deal for 30 years. They avoided the terrible 1990s in Russia with the crazy privatization. They never went there. And Lukashenko has been very shrewd. He's kept them out of conflicts. And there was attempts starting in the 1990s with Sikorsky, when he had that European initiative, was trying to rope in all these states within the EU and NATO. He kind of avoided that. And so, that's why he's kind of popular. And it says 39-year-old teacher Dmitry says, I grew up under his rule and I saw the whole story. I believe in him. As long as he has strength, Alexander Grigorievich will govern the country, he said, using Lukashenko's name and patronymic. And then it says, but Dmitry admitted that Western sanctions are affecting families one way or another, and said he knew people who fled the country fearing repression by the KGB security agency, which has retained its feared Soviet-era name. The economy in Belarus is largely planned by the state, with Lukashenko, a former collective farm boss, having shunned reforming swathes of the Soviet legacy. Well, again, I mean, if people have jobs and they're making some money, that's not a bad deal. And it says many Belarusians do not have access to European products, while rail and air links have also been cut, making Minsk even more reliant on Russia.
Well, I mean, again, that there's no look. There's a free trade zone that includes Belarus and Russia. So
Right.
do not have access to European pro. That's not true. It's just simply not true. I don't know. It makes it sound like they're deprived. Okay, they're not. Okay.
Right. Um, um, and then it says others dismiss the economic difficulties. It's not important, said 74-year-old Sergei Kuznetsov, saying Minsk has found an alternative. All our sales go to China. Antonina, also in her 70s, said she was supporting Lukashenko, who signed a decree to raise pensions a few days before the vote. It's
A
very
good
good, she
politician,
said.
like a good politician.
That's what politicians do. It's very good, she said, saying she receives around 300 euros a month, which is not much in maybe in Germany or may not be much in the United States. 300 euros a month is actually pretty decent in Belarus. Um, and then the EU's top diplomat said Lukashenko doesn't have any legitimacy. And then, they repeat the Kaya Kallas thing. He has clung to power for 30 years. Tomorrow he'll reappoint himself in yet
I
another.
really think this woman, Kalakalas, I don't. She's just not going to be. She's not going to be seen as a person of any kind of authority in any sense
No,
of. She's just not going to have the same kind. Because Burrell was interesting. Burrell was funny. Burrell was
right.
bizarre. This
Yes.
is just a screaming,
Yes.
out of control
Right.
woman that's having a fit in public all the
That's
time.
right. No, exactly. But the thing about Borrell is that he used to blurt out truths. It's like, he starts off saying one thing and then he starts blurting things out. It's like, well, now you're kind of arguing against yourself.
No, George and I, some of the best podcasts we've ever done is watch Burrell ratio himself in his own missives. Okay. I mean, this guy had an amazing talent.
Right.
Remember the garden in the jungle
Oh yeah,
thing?
yeah. Well, there's the jungle
Okay,
outside our well-tended garden.
yes. I mean, he got skewered for doing that. And then he came another bite at the apple and it got worse.
Yes. Um, well, they gave her. You see, remember Kaya Kallas? She wanted to be NATO Secretary General. But the problem was that some of the more sensible, and even that's hard to say there's anyone sensible in the EU. But the Germans and the French says we can't have this nutcase as NATO Secretary General, so they had to give her something, and so they gave her this position. I think, well, you don't really have any power, and you're not very important. You're the EU foreign minister.
Well, in fact, it's been pointed out to me, and this was years ago, this is where you exile someone.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. um, and then on Friday, the European Commission described the elections as a total sham. They're not elections when you already know who will win, said the Commission spokesperson on foreign affairs, Anita Hipper. They're not elections where you know who will win. What about when you know who will win? Like in Romania, yeah, you knew who would win, so you canceled the election. I mean, yeah, that's exactly right. Just like in Moldova, you decided we're not. We need to steal this election. I mean, we're in real trouble here because we know Maya Sandu is not going to win. We need to do some serious stealing. They're not elections when you already know who will win. That kind of sounds like elections in the EU.
Yep.
So, but anyway, I think, it's a foregone conclusion, but it seems like that's almost like the Europeans, other than Kaja Kallas, have given up. They realize that basically that you're not going to get rid of Lukashenko. You're not going to get a color revolution in Belarus, and you're not going to get it because there are no takers there. I mean, yeah, you got to rent a mob, a few hundred people out on the streets of Minsk. You're not going to topple the government with a few hundred rent a mob types. So it's almost like there's just no energy to start whipping up further against Lukashenko.
Why should anyone outside of Belarus really care who runs the country?
No, no,
Why? Why is it so important?
right,
It's ideologically important to you?
right,
Okay. I
yeah,
mean, France 24, which, file that one under weird because you don't usually get that kind
no,
of
no,
impression.
absolutely. That's why this was strange. I mean, you're quoting at length what these people are saying, and I could have even gone further with these people who were saying about the sanctions. Well, the sanctions have hurt us, but the point is that these people like Tikhanovskaya have called for sanctions. In other words, these are people in Belarus saying these sanctions have hurt us, and then this person aspires to be the leader of Belarus, and she's calling for sanctions against her own country. How can she aspire to be the leader of our country if she wants sanctions against our country? So, which is why Tikhanovsky is just a person now of no consequence at all.
Well, one of the other reasons, and you've actually went through it twice. I mean, if democracy is such an important value, it's one of our values, okay? I mean, even a cursory view of European politics, you can say, well, I mean, why are you pushing so hard for democracy in a non-EU country?
Right.
In the EU, we have people that want to shut down parties,
Right.
want to silence
Right.
oppositions, all of your censorship mania, and you're worried about what's going on in Belarus. It just doesn't ring real, okay? It doesn't ring serious at
Right.
all.
That's right. But of course, it's always so um, ridiculous when they start talking about democracy because, of course, they don't care about democracy because their idea of democracy is when we win
Yeah,
elections.
when you agree with me.
Exactly. When you lose elections, suddenly it's already not a democracy. So every time they lose an election, suddenly, oh, this has no legitimacy. This was clearly a rigged election. So with Orban, oh, of course Orban, it's always manipulating the election. So because you're not winning them. So when they go, oh, we believe in democracy. This is our values. You don't believe in democracy. I mean, in case after case after case. When you lose elections, you immediately declare them to be illegitimate. So it's a total fraud. Your commitment to this nebulous notion of democracy is a fraud. You don't believe in democracy. You just believe in a perpetual rule of people and the people on your payroll.
You know, part of the history of communism in the Soviet Union was to remake the world in the image of an ideology, exporting the revolution. I'd like to have a long chat with George about Trotsky because I'm very dismissive of him in almost every single
Right,
dimension. He was
right,
basically a Western communist invention
right.
after the fact.
Yeah,
That's my opinion. Okay.
yeah,
But don't you see how the European Union is trying to remake the world in its own image? And if
right,
you don't want to transform yourself in our image, then you're not legitimate. Then you're not even worth transforming. I mean, it's a very totalitarian mindset. Okay. If you lose an election, stand yourself up, dust yourself off, and try again. That's basically the
right,
Western tradition,
right.
right?
Yeah, that's it. That's what it's.
Look at George Galloway. You know, he came back, and then they got him out, and he might come back again. Okay? There's a true Democrat right there.
Yeah, that's exactly that's how it's supposed to work. But the point is that as we've seen, they say that with Lukashenko, he has to be doing something right. You don't just go on winning election after election if you're not delivering goods for the people. That's it's clear that he keeps delivering, which is why he's prevailing. And when you get to sort of the Maya Sandu in Moldova and think of all of the money, this huge resources that the EU poured into this tiny country to get her over the finish line, and even then they couldn't do it. Then you say, well, this is a person who really has no popular support. After all the effort and all the money you poured in, you still had to basically disenfranchise hundreds of thousands of people because you weren't going to win. And same with in Georgia. I mean, they poured in all this money to get Georgia Dream out, and they failed. So clearly, whatever you're selling, the NATO EU transatlantic partnership program that you're selling, I mean, there's increasingly few takers.
Look,
just simply crying democracy isn't going to do the job.
If you with even a cursory review research of the Belarusian economy, there is a high-tech sector there. Okay, it's quite successful. They have their own little Silicon Valley. And then you have parts of the economy that are large parts of it that are state controlled and planned. They make appliances. Okay, they're good at refrigerators and stoves and stuff like that. They're competitive. It's not top drawer stuff, but they're affordable. They're very affordable, and you know what? They work. Okay, they pride themselves. You buy this refrigerator, it could be generational because these things keep working on you.
Right.
So you have this high-tech sector that is successful, and then you have a state sector. If you're in the tech sector, this is where liberals they turn away in shame. But food is cheap, electricity is cheap, okay? Water is free, okay? So I mean, if why would you want to change that? I mean, all of the basic things you need to live are very, very cheap. That means your marginal disposable income, not too bad living in Minsk, okay? Because the price of eggs are not going to go up. The price of milk isn't going to go up. It's all subsidized, okay? That's a pretty good deal if you're upwardly mobile.
Right. No, I think that's exactly right. I mean, basically you have a politician who is delivering, which has always been the criterion that one uses with politicians. You may not like him for whatever reason, but you say this person delivers. It's like if you think of let's say the model of the United States, something like Mayor Daley of Chicago, a terrible man, a liar, a crook, very brutal, but he delivered, and he was always known
around election time
for his constituents.
Around election time,
when exactly he
was that bag of groceries just showed up. Remember, vote for
that's
right. Here's this for you, dear. Okay,
that's it, and that's
true story.
That's it. And everyone knew, when you had Mayor Daley in Chicago, well, hey, the snow got cleared on time. With all the kind of problems that you have in cities was solved. And that's all you had to deliver. So whatever the feelings they may have had about Daley, they say, well, okay, if he can deliver on this, can make my life habitable and safe, which is also very important, then we re-elect him, and he, like Lukashenko, he kept getting re-elected time and time again. So, that's the way it goes with politics.
What is politics? Okay, is it an intellectual exercise? Is it, something to make you feel good about yourself and your community, being accredited, professional and all that? Politics is about living and getting through the day.
Right.
And basically with limited deprivations and safety.
Right.
If you can
limited
deprivations and safety, you're going to be elected for life.
That's right. Okay? Exactly. Whereas the Western model of a political leader is, well, he plays ball with us and then leads his people to complete disaster. Like someone like the Armenian president Pashinyan. That's the kind of the Western model of a leader. I mean, he's led his country into complete catastrophe.
Does Armenia have any friends now?
I don't think so.
I don't think so. It
Yeah,
wasn't always that way. And I've always said, and I mean this very seriously, Armenians of all people
yeah,
know that you can disappear. Okay.
yeah,
You know, a country like Armenia has to be the most adroit of adroit countries to
right.
manage a difficult neighborhood. No, no, we want to join the Euro-Atlantic. You're not even there. Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Why?
Yeah. That's right. That's right. And and it's exactly right. He's there. He's kind of constantly getting bullied by Azerbaijan, and lo and behold, no one's coming to his aid.
And Armenia
Every day
is
that
getting
passes, he gets bullied
smaller,
more and more by Azerbaijan, and no one's coming to his aid.
and Armenia is getting smaller and smaller. And they want to piss off the Russians. I don't have time for people like this. If you can't
Right.
even recognize your own self-interest from an existential point of view, then
Right.
you're not worth talking to.
Right.
You're not a credible interlocutor.
Yeah.
Okay? Because you're waiting for a carrier pigeon from a message from Brussels? Really?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. And there's the contrast then with Belarus, also small country, population 9 million, doing very nicely economically and secure, and delivers for his people and enjoys security. Basically, no one, despite Poland, doing this bluster about we're going to deal with Belarus, they're not going to deal with it. They're not going to try their hand at dealing with Belarus. So he has delivered, and therefore you ultimately say that he has been a successful and effective leader, which is all that people want, as from their president. Whatever. Oh, it was democratic or not democratic. Has he been a successful and effective leader? Is your life better? Is your life safer? Is your country in a better situation than it was, 4 years ago? And especially, is it better than it would have been had the opposition been in power? And that's why they're looking, these people that were quoted, they're looking at the opposition and say, hey, we would have been an absolute disaster if Tikhanovskaya had been elected
Well,
president.
since you mentioned her name, that was going to be my last question. In the research that you did for this podcast, did her name pop up?
Only in passing, only in passing, and that's was so striking. I looked through a number of stories. Her name is only in passing, and then you think, well, wow, 2020. We remember the 4 years ago that the election, and she was everywhere. This very very attractive young woman, and she was a sort of the Kaya Kalas of her time. Boom, just vanished. Other than she also made some routine, dictator, dictator, but barely registered.
All right. Okay, that's no one else does it, but we do it. Our Belarusian watch. Okay. Okay. Watch and update. Okay. All right. This is the Gaggle with Peter and George. We're on local, so please go to thegaggle.locals.com. Today we're doing our mega Sunday wrap. Tomorrow at 10 a.m. Eastern time, we're doing our live stream.
10 a.m. Eastern time. Please come with comments, observations, and above all, questions. We love answering questions. The tougher, more intriguing questions, the better. So homework, assignment. Please think of as many good questions between now and 10 a.m. Tomorrow. And then on Tuesday, 3 p.m. Eastern time, I do my solo. But in the meantime, got to deal with this dog because now there are 4 savage dogs, all demanding money. That's all they care about. Money. You got to put money into that pot because they say, hey, we're doing all the work and we're not getting paid for it. And they say, hey, that's not a successful business model. They argue. So if you have some money, go, and then they're now saying not coins, bills, paper money. You put paper into the tip jar. So we're very grateful for all of your help, friendship, and support. The more you're able to donate, the more of these videos we can make, the more we can improve the technology, and above all, we're going to keep these hounds, locked up for a little while longer. So remember, if you like the gaggle, please like, share, and subscribe. See you soon. Oh my God.